can sponsors reasonably expect from their functional lead, and how can leads manage those expectations? And the second question to think about as you're answering this is, what do you see as frequently misunderstood about by sponsors about the lead's role?
This is a huge question. I'm happy to take a stab at it first. And stats is probably at the more extreme end of this, because stats can kind of be treated like all of biometrics, but I think especially stats, it can be treated as this black box where it's like, just give me my p-value, just give me my confidence intervals, and we're good. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. And honestly, that leads to real issues in the long run. So I think what sponsors should be able to reasonably expect from a lead statistician is, yes, the end results of the clinical trial, but also they should be able to expect updates in terms of what they're doing and why they are doing it, when they are doing it. So if you can, as a lead, respond to the who, what, where, when, why, and how of your processes, it just sets the study up and the sponsor up for so much more success. And that way the sponsor's not coming to you randomly with questions that you weren't expecting. You've already answered those questions. You've already put them forward to them. This is why we're drafting the SAP today versus 2 years from now. This is why we have to program the ATOM data sets this month in order to reach the interim analysis, which is, yes, 4 months away, but we need to program today so that way those programs are ready to run and they're validated by the time the interim analysis does come. So I think to put a label around anything specific what the sponsor can expect, it depends. It is determined by the study's needs. However, what the sponsor should be able to expect as a given across all studies, regardless of what that study is, a phase 1B small study or a global phase 3 study, they should be able to expect that their lead statistician will inform them of what they are doing, why they are doing it, and even to some degree how they are doing it. So that way the sponsor can then take those answers or details and give it to their key stakeholders, either their board or their investors or whoever they have to go to. And I know that this is really a disguised way of me saying the word communication, but ultimately that is, I think, a fair assumption of what the sponsor should expect to see. Audrey, I'd love for you to add to this and take us home.
So I think that what you described really goes for all functional leads, right? So the sponsor should reasonably expect the functional lead to manage the activities of their functional areas and provide feedback to everything related to that functional area, to be able to answer questions that they might have. But a good lead, like you said, is proactive in managing their functional area. And I don't think it's unreasonable for a sponsor to expect a lead to proactively manage their functional area and provide that regular status updates and feedbacks. Your sponsor usually tends to get worried and stressed if they don't know what's going on. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad, they just need to know. If they know, you can manage it. And I think that is a reasonable expectation. We've mentioned earlier the amount of money and things that gets invested in clinical trials. So there's sometimes a lot that's riding for a sponsor on the outcome of a trial. It makes them nervous and it's stressful for them as well. So it's not unreasonable for them to expect of you as a lead to just keep them up to date with what's going on in their study. And we need to also remember that from a GCP perspective, even though they've outsourced this work to you as a CRO, they still remain ultimately responsible for this clinical trial. So help them to feel comfortable in having the ultimate responsibility for managing this trial.
Yeah. And this approach not only helps the sponsor to have trust and confidence in us, it also helps us to manage sponsors' expectation. I mean, when we are proactively and transparently inform sponsor of what's going on and provide rationales for our decisions. So, like a typical example, sometimes sponsor ask questions. So why a tiny little thing? So, for example, tiny change in the data causes so much extra work for us. And then we need to be prepared to give the sponsor a rationale, to give them a breakdown that there is a process, like we need to run the programs, we need to validate and then communicate back with the data management, start review cycles, etc. And we need to explain to them that the process is there for reason, not for fun, because we need to ensure the quality and comply with regulatory requirements.
Yeah, great point, because I think that they really just want to know, because the person you're talking to, the sponsor, is going to have to talk to somebody else above them, and they want to be able to explain it. And so it's reasonable for them to expect that we are going to give them the information that they need. I think it's also reasonable for them to expect, if going back to every clinical trial has a problem, when you're having a problem on your trial, it's reasonable for them to expect more frequent communication. If they know you're actively working or trying to find a solution, I think it's reasonable for them to expect an update from you pretty frequently. Whatever that frequency depends on, the timeline you're working on. If you're working on a month timeline, it's different than if you're working on a 3-day timeline, where you'll want to be updating them multiple times a day. But they are reasonable to expect that, because otherwise they're just sitting there worried, and then they're calling people and making them worried, and that doesn't work